Hola amigos de tampahoy.com, estamos aquí conectados viendo el momento en el que el gobernador Ron DeSantis va a llegar en una conferencia de prensa que va a estar realizando desde la ciudad de Orlando. En estos momentos estamos esperando que el primer mandatario del estado de Florida haga su entrada a esta conferencia de prensa en la que se espera que él plantee las prioridades presupuestarias del estado de Florida. En estos momentos vemos que están entrando todos los miembros del comité que lo acompaña diariamente. Así que vamos a ver en vivo esta conferencia de prensa que inicia ahora. Saludos amigos de tampahoy.com que nos acompañan a través de nuestras plataformas digitales de tampahoy.com, a través de nuestra aplicación móvil WFLA y también nuestras plataformas como Instagram, también X y en YouTube. Así que amigos, acompáñenos ahora en esta conferencia de prensa que inicia en estos momentos y que vamos a escuchar al gobernador Ron DeSantis ofrecer los detalles que va a brindar en esta
Florida
conferencia.
State Guard Executive Director Mark Teamy and UCF President Dr. Cartwright. And I know we've got some board members and some other folks, so I want to thank everybody for being here. So we're doing this today announcement to unveil our budget recommendations for the 26-27 fiscal year. And it's always good to be in a situation where we're being able to do this from a position of fiscal strength. So if you look back when I became governor, there was about, I think, $1.3 billion in Florida's rainy day fund. Now with this budget, we've more than tripled the state's rainy day fund. In fact, we're maxing it out to where you're not even allowed under Florida's Constitution to put any more money in the rainy day fund. We also launched a couple years ago in conjunction with some folks in the Florida legislature a program to accelerate the repayment of Florida's outstanding state debt. You can have some of this stuff. We got guys that do a good job of this. They can buy the bonds on the open market, oftentimes at a discount, retire them. Then we save.
Como les mencioné, el gobernador Ron DeSantis está hablando sobre el presupuesto del estado de Florida y los cambios que va a estar presentando en el día de hoy. Vas a tener toda esta información una vez termine la conferencia de prensa en tampahoy.com y en todas nuestras plataformas digitales. En esta conferencia de prensa junto al gobernador Ron DeSantis va a estar el comisionado de educación Anastasios Comostosas, también va a estar el director ejecutivo del Departamento de Seguridad Vial y Vehículos Motorizados de Florida, el DMV, Dave Kerner, y el director ejecutivo de la Guardia Estatal de Florida, Mark Teamy. Así que vamos a escuchar lo que diga el gobernador Ron DeSantis en estos momentos y más adelante les voy a dar un resumen de sus nuevas iniciativas y también de los detalles del presupuesto del estado de Florida para el 2026-2027.
And basically doing it with a stable budget. We will not have had any real significant overall increases in the budget. You'd probably have to go back, 3 or 4 years. The current year's budget that we're in spends less than the year before that, and that year spent less than the year before that. So we're basically right in line with that as we look forward to going. And I'm proud of that. I think Florida's really led the way with fiscal responsibility. I've had to veto some stuff, that the legislature's done with line items, and I you got to do what you got to do, right? I mean, it is what it is. I want to keep the budget in certain areas. But that being said, I mean, it's like I've vetoed more than any governor, but at the same time, by and large, the budgets have been good. There's some things here or there that we may disagree on, but by and large, we've had a really good, I think, team effort here to make sure Florida remains fiscally responsible. So what does 117, what does that mean? Well, it means a couple things. One, Florida has probably close to 23.5 million people now. That budget number that we're currently under, that I'm proposing for next year, that's less than the budget of New York City, which is only 8 million people. New York State, which is 3 or 4 million people fewer than Florida, their budget's over twice the size of the state of Florida's budget. I can tell you the roads aren't better up there because I was just up there. And the taxes, of course, are a lot higher. So we're really showing, how it can be done. There's a couple tweaks that we make here, there on different things. But our overall footprint from a government perspective is that we have the lowest number of state government workers per capita, and we either are the lowest or second lowest in state spending per capita of all 50 states. And so the outcomes, are superior to states that are spending 25, 50, 100% more per capita or even outright than we are in the Sunshine State. This budget, and so we're keeping within that, and we're going to be able to do, more debt retirement early, all this other stuff. But we're also doing some really, really big things. And so in the budget I'm proposing, we are setting aside a record $1.56 billion solely for teacher pay increases. And so we started this program a few years ago, actually probably 5 or 6 years ago now, because, people would say, pay teachers more. So the legislature, if they would do more education spending, it goes down to the districts, and then magically it gets spent on everything pretty much but that, right? So we said, all right, we're not just going to send money. So we're going to do a pot of money. That's the only thing you can use it for. And so we started, with 500, half a billion, and now we're up to over $1.5 billion to be able to do that. And so that's been able to provide meaningful differences in teachers' professional lives. Now, there's still a few districts when we do this, they will withhold the teacher salaries, and they use that as bargaining chips, these unions, for other things. And it's just ridiculous. I mean, you should be getting that out the door immediately. People want the help. They want to be able to do that. So we're going to continue doing this. I think it's been very successful. It's a way to make sure that money actually is going in the classroom. I mean, basically, it's the classroom. 90% of it is, what teacher do you have standing in front of the classroom? That's the most important thing. You can talk about bells and whistles and all this stuff, and I'm not saying none of that stuff matters at all, but ultimately it's that teacher that's there. By the way, we were probably the first state or one of the first states to not allow cell phones in class. And, part of it was it's not good for kids learning and all that, being on the phone and everything. But, part of it was we actually did that as part of a teacher bill of rights. It's like, you're in front of there. Why do this if everyone just buried texting all the time? So we didn't think it was fair for them. And then also just having discipline in the classroom. So we were doing that. Now this was a few years ago. When we did it, I think someone on MSNBC said it was an example of rising fascism in America. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, now everyone's doing it, so they say it's good, right? But we were doing it, so it's got to be bad from their perspective. But you've seen positive results, I think, in performance, and that's something that's really, really significant. And, I made an announcement last week about a Bill of Rights against artificial intelligence. And this is going to be a huge issue. It could be way worse than cell phones or social media if we don't approach this in an intelligent and rational fashion. There's a whole host of implications for society. They want to put data centers where it's going to take up all this power and water, and obviously we're not going to, allow them to take away from ratepayers and make them pay more. We're going to protect that. There's issues about, what it does to the job market, which is the reason why you wouldn't want to subsidize this. And then there's also issues about, your personal likeness and what they can do and truth in advertising. There's a whole bunch of stuff. But how this is going to impact education is a huge issue. And it's going to be something, I know there's a lot of folks in the legislature that are working on it. But that being said, we put our money where our mouth is. We did record funding for teacher pay increases for Florida, and this proposal today is the biggest by far. And I can tell you, people that have followed this stuff, If we were here, 4 or 5 years ago and someone said, yeah, they're going to end up doing $1.56 billion for teacher salaries, people would say that's not feasible. That's not possible. That will never happen. We've shown it's possible. We've gotten it done. The overall education budget, K-12, is another record, $30.6 billion. I think when I became governor, it was probably like, somewhere in the low 20s. So you've seen. Now, I'm not one to say the money is going to necessarily equate to outcome, because you have some places that have massive spending and they have horrible results. And I think a lot of it is that money is going for special interests rather than to actually help. But so the money itself isn't necessarily going to be determinative, but you've seen the commitment has been very, very strong for our K-12 education system. We're doing $1.7 billion in funding for early child education, almost $2 billion for our state college system. We have this great college system where people are getting a lot of practical skills and are really making a difference in their communities, and that should be applauded. We're also doing $4 billion for the state university system. We're ranked by, I believe, U.S. News and World Report as the #1 public university system, in the United States. And there's been a lot of great things that have happened over really many years, where the bar has been raised academically. At least on the state university, not quite with football yet. I mean, we'll see what happens. I know University of Miami got in the playoff, which I was very supportive of, but it's not a state university. At least we have some Florida representation. Although, UCF, you guys, this USF coach is going to be really good. I think they're going to be tough. So we've had great strides. But I'll tell you, the most important factor is why we're ranked #1 public university system is affordability. We have not raised tuition for in-state since I've been governor, and so it's about $6,300 for an in-state Florida resident to be able to go to, and we have a number of universities that are ranked very, very highly amongst public and even amongst other universities. They did a thing with the, I think it was the Manhattan Institute, and it was published in the Wall Street Journal. It was a ranking of universities, but they were focusing on also not just legacy prestige, which, look, that's a factor, right? I mean, like if someone says Harvard, everyone immediately thinks, that's a high academics, right? And Harvard was founded in the 1600s, Yale 1701. This is before we were even a country. So, I mean, there's a lot of legacy that kind of gets built up there, and that's fine, but it's like, okay, what about all these other things? What about, free speech? What about some of the things that really are important, focusing on strong academics, not the ideological stuff, all this stuff. So they did different criteria, and on that criteria, University of Florida actually ranked #1 because this is more about what's the experience. It's not just focusing on legacy, prestige. So that's something that's really good. But the affordability to be able to go to a public university and not have to really take out a single cent in loan. Because, if you work part-time jobs, you could do it. If you're good enough to get in a lot of these schools now, you probably qualify for the Bright Futures Scholarship, which is 100% or 75% tuition, depending on what you qualify for. So we're graduating students that don't have this ridiculous financial millstone around their necks. And I'll tell you, and it started in I remember being in high school, and certainly in the years after, kids were told, high school students, you got to go to college. You don't get that degree, your prospects are not going to be strong. And yeah, if you go $100,000 in debt and you end up with a engineering degree from MIT, you're probably going to be okay. I'm not going to sit there and tell you ain't going to be able to handle that. You probably will. But if you go to some fourth-tier private university, some of that's even more expensive than MIT, and then you graduate with a degree in zombie studies, well, guess what? The C's aren't going to part for you. And you're going to end up in a job maybe you could have had at a high school, but then you have this huge financial millstone around your neck. And so I think a lot of these students were sold the bill of goods over the years. I think a lot of these universities were able to profit because they basically could get the loans. It's the federal government's responsibility. Since 2010, I guess they took it over. And so why does a fourth-tier university care if you go 50 or 100 or 150 in debt? That's not going to be their problem. And so there's not been any accountability for that. Incidentally, I think the university should be responsible for the loans ultimately. I mean, I think that if someone can't pay it, then that should be something that was a failure of the university to be able to do it. They should have some risk in this, but be that as it may, that's a different subject. But the affordability is so important, and our state colleges are very affordable too. We are keeping that going. We're keeping the Bright Futures fully funded. There have been people through the years that have wanted to take whacks at it. I've always been a defender of it because you think about it. You have families that are just working like middle class. They don't get anything. Like literally, they get less than somebody that's on welfare, and they get less than a lot of the rich people who have access to policy and can get bailouts and everything. So literally, they just got to do it. They got to work hard. They got to do. They don't get anything. The one thing that they can get for their kids is Bright Futures Scholarship, which is, even though the tuition's not high comparatively, that's a huge plus. You have 2 or 3 kids and you send them, and they get the Bright Futures. Major thing. So I'm a big believer in it. I think it's been good. When you do scholarships, it's not really as bad. When you do a lot of loans, that ends up, we control the tuition, but like in private, every time they increase loans, the tuition goes up. And so you're not really, the student and the family aren't any better off from having done the loans because the tuition keeps going. So we've had no increase in tuition. This is one of the most inflationary things in modern American history, college tuition, but not in the state of Florida. So that's a really, really good thing. Another thing that we've done is, yes, these are good financial commitments. We believe in the mission, but you got to have good structure and policy in place so that the outcomes are going to be good. And so we did things to make sure that we have productive faculty, that we're not having faculty positions and tenure being used to advance agendas. So we have post-tenure review. All the tenure now have to go review and can be terminated. So people have been weeded out now over the last few years. But on the flip side, we've now empowered college presidents. If you run a school like Hamilton School, University of Florida, which is amazing, they can go and recruit faculty directly. And we've given money, $100 million. We did a couple years ago, I think 2 years in a row. Legislature didn't fund it this year. We put that in the budget. Recruit and retain bonuses to be able to bring people to Florida at our state universities and then keep them there for the long haul. And I could tell you, we were doing this thing at the University of Florida with the Hamilton School, the groundbreaking. And because they have this ability to recruit and pay without having to, go through the old system, you have all these people there. And it's like the best Civil War historian from Princeton is now at University of Florida. They just had a guy from Harvard, 40 years, one of the best political theorists. He's now at Hamilton Center. And he told me, he's like, I needed to find a place that was sane. And so he came to Florida. You have that. But then I'm like meeting with some of these people, and you have they're like kids almost, like young scholars, like probably in their 30s. And I'm like meeting, came from, California, Stanford, University of Chicago, Oxford, Cambridge, you name it. And it's all because, yes, we've provided resources, but we've provided a way to recruit and bring people in. There's this idea that some have said with universities that it's shared governance between the faculty and the administration. Not in Florida. You get hired as faculty, your job is to teach and do research and publish whatever. You don't get to govern the university. And so that's why we don't want faculty blackballing good professors from being able to be hired. We have an ability, the boards can take them, the presidents can take them in and get them going. So I'm really excited about that. So on education, this is as robust as we've ever done, both in pre-K, VPK, both in K-12, both in higher ed, and not just throwing money, but really using it in a way that's going to help us produce good outcomes. We also have major support for infrastructure and transportation. So over $14 billion for our state work program. So that more than funds everything we need to do. And I did Moving Florida Forward, which said all the stuff we need. And Central Florida is the #1 place, right? Because, some of the stuff they've done around here has helped. But you get down near Disney and Champions Gate and Polk on I-4, all those other areas, and it's not just rush hour. It could happen at any time, right? So we're like, all right, we got to get this stuff going. So there were projects that weren't even going to start till next decade that are now started. They're going to be delayed. But we decided to do temporary expansion as the permitted is being done. So just opening up the temporary has cut the commutes in half. Like they literally will have the videos before and after, and you see it flow better. So we're doing that. We're doing all the stuff in all those different areas and in other parts of the state too. Tampa Bay, we've got the 395 interchange in Miami. We've got stuff in the Panhandle. I-75 near Ocala, like that's a big project. You guys, anytime you go, if you have to go north on 75 from here, you will potentially hit some bad traffic once you get near Ocala. So widening that, doing a bunch of stuff. So this is big, and this is on top of all the additional money that we brought to bear to be able to do so much over so many years. We are including major pay increases for state law enforcement. So for us, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, State Highway Patrol, our state troopers, as well as law enforcement associated with other agencies like Fish and Wildlife. And that's something that, one, is earned. It's something that they deserve, but it's also something we need to do to be able to recruit and retain. You don't want to be in a situation where they can make more money doing, other things that may not be as demanding, because then people are going to make those decisions. We're going to continue our law enforcement recruitment bonus program. So we instituted this when they were talking about defunding the police years ago. And honestly, these police officers are being treated horrible in places like Seattle and New York City and all this stuff. And so we said, listen, we want good people in Florida. We do have a need to have more growing state, everything. So we're going to do a $5,000 bonus for new recruits. And that could mean you move from Chicago. Could also mean you come out of school and you want to go into law enforcement. You can get it even as a Floridian for that if it's your first law enforcement gig. So that's been really effective. We were just up in New York the other day meeting with some of the law enforcement community, and they're very worried about what's going to happen with Mindami becoming mayor, because he's hated the police, for most of his life, and wanted to disband the agency and all this other stuff, and says that prisons are. He said that prisons are somehow like a waste of resources. You should just be, putting people on the street, bringing social workers. I mean, like, I can just tell you, it's not even like Republican, Democrat. I'm just telling you, this is not going to work, okay? That will not work. And so they're in a situation where how much support are they going to have? Would you want to wear the uniform and risk your life to apprehend a dangerous suspect, bring them in, and then the judge just puts them right back out? And you got to do it again a week later when the person commits more crimes? It's demoralizing. I mean, people don't want to do that. So I do think you're going to see a reaction to that. And I'm not saying they're all going to come to Florida, but I do think you're going to see some. So there'll be some opportunities to be able to recruit some good people. We're going to continue. You'll hear from Mark about the Florida State Guard, which has been a huge asset. He'll talk about some of the things that we did. That was started by the legislature. Not started because we've always had it. It just kind of got mothballed, I think, after World War II. But they did it when Biden became president because, we were fighting, for example, we wouldn't do the vax mandates for National Guard. And we said, we're not doing it. And we didn't do it. But if push really came to shove, ultimately your National Guard can be conscripted by the federal government. And that was what we were concerned about. So we said, why don't we have something to control our own destiny? Has no federal tentacles. It's purely the state of Florida. And they've done things like hurricane response. They've done all this stuff. And it's been great. And I think people really feel a sense of pride, that they're involved in that. So we're able to do that. Now, obviously, our relationship is much more positive with the federal government now than it was during those Biden years. But I still think it's like this is important to have for the state going forward, not just now, but 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We also have additional major support for the National Guard. Major support for improving veterans' nursing homes, historic support for cancer research, our Cancer Collaborative Incubator program that my wife has really done a great job spearheading, as well as the Innovation Fund, which a lot of these institutions are now able to benefit from, and not just the handful that are well known. You have others that may be doing some more cutting edge stuff. We're really, really supportive of that all the way around. And then finally, environment. We promise more on environmental restoration than anybody thought possible. We've exceeded that by a country mile in terms of what we've been able to do. And some of that is Everglades, which is the biggest restoration program in all the country, and maybe even for environment, maybe in the world, but certainly for the United States, the largest undertaking that's ever been done or that's currently being done. But we've also done stuff for the health of springs. We've done a lot of transition from septic systems to sewer systems. We've done conservation with the Florida Wildlife Corridor, massive acreage that's been now there and is going to be conserved, and is going to end up being some concrete jungle. And that's a huge part of the state now, and we're going to continue, adding for all that. We're also doing beach renourishment, supporting coastline, very important for tourism and all these other things. And, I know that the Interior Department had floated doing the Gulf drilling, and, we've not supported that since I've been governor. We don't. But, it's not even just with the tourism and risk. Military uses that to train. All those pilots in the Panhandle, that's what they go. So that's important too. But protecting the coastline is something that's really, really significant. And, people, you go to different parts of the country, and there's some nice spots. But I'll tell you, if you like beach, we are number one, across the board. I mean, there's just no question. And not every part of Florida is as good as every other part, and I will keep my mouth shut about what I know is best. But it's just, we hit the heights. It's really important, and it's been great for our economy, but also just doing things like Everglades restoration. You now have stronger aquifer in South Florida. You have more water going to Florida Bay, better fishing, better salinity levels, all better, even flora and fauna, the eco-tourists that want to go there and take pictures. You see a resurgence in some of this stuff. There are going to be more. We're going to continue. We've stepped up the python removal in the Everglades. We stepped it up when I was and we kept doing better. But we needed a moon, so we got some private sector incentives. So there's a lot of great stuff that's happening there. So all being said, I think what the budget does is it builds off the success that we've had. This budget's entitled Floridians First because that's the focus of it. It's putting our people first and making sure we're good stewards, but also making sure that folks, that the needs that we have are being addressed. One final side item that I will mention. So we have no income tax, and we won't. We have sales tax, but almost all the essentials now are exempt. Your groceries, medication, we did the exemption for all baby items. So diapers, wipes, strollers, all that is exempt. Back to school holiday is now permanent in law. Disaster supplies is now permanent in law. We're currently in the middle of what I call the Second Amendment sales tax holiday. No tax on accoutrements, ammunition, firearms. I think fishing, camping, all this stuff is tax-free till the end of the year, which is great. But when people talk taxes, yeah, they like getting the brakes on those things. But when they talk taxes, what they're talking to us about is property taxes. And so, the state doesn't control property taxes. It's a local issue. I think most people have followed me know that I'm talking about having something on the ballot in November of 2026. We're working on some good stuff, but we're doing this very deliberately. We're making sure it's something that can get broad support. It's not a Republican Democrat thing. It's just about a taxpayer thing. We want you to own your own home, our homesteaded Floridians. We don't want to be in a situation where you've been paying taxes for 20 years, and if you stop paying, then they can just take your home. We also want to make it affordable for young people, young families, because property values have gone up. Even if they can afford the home, they're paying way more taxes than the same home would have cost if they had purchased it 10 years earlier and then had homestead to limit the valuation increases. So this is a huge issue, and we'll have some more to say about it, going forward. But because of the way Florida's tax structure is, this is a local function, and if you want to see relief in a real major way, it's got to go on the ballot in 2026, and then Florida voters have to approve it as an amendment to the Constitution. I've been very clear that we've got non-Floridians who own property, foreign. There's rich people from Brazil and all these people. They own a mansion in like Miami or whatever. You have people that own Airbnbs. Obviously, we have commercial landowners, and they all do property tax. Our focus is on residential homesteaded Floridians, your primary residents, and whether can you own that free and clear, and the exemptions that you would get. So sometimes people say, oh, there's not going to be any revenue. No, all that other stuff will still be there. Interesting fact, in 2019, so this is the first year I was governor, local governments in Florida brought in $32 billion in property tax revenue. Today, they're bringing in $56 billion in property tax revenue. Now, yes, the state has grown. Yes, we've had inflation. And I'm not saying that, even like if you do inflation, population inflation adjusted, the nominal number will be higher. There's no question because of the underlying changes in Florida and the overall economy with the inflation. But that's almost doubling the revenue in 6 years that we're seeing. So the majority of the revenue is not homestead residential. It's non-resident, non-homestead residential, commercial, and investment. So you're talking about a fraction of this. So we have an opportunity to do something big. Now, some places have more wherewithal. Now, I think we've been showing, or Blaze and Gully has been showing, overspending, and we want to make sure that the taxpayers are getting breaks rather than have more spending. But put that aside. There's some communities, some counties that are fiscally constrained. We have 32 of them. And they're more rural, and they don't have the economic engine that an Orlando has, or that a South Florida has, or a Tampa, or a Jacksonville. And so I've put in the budget, and I'm not saying it's even going to be necessary, but I put in the budget enough money to completely 100% reimburse any homestead property tax reduction for those fiscally constrained counties. And so I don't want to, don't tell go tell your senator you're not going to have. No, you will have it. Now, there's some people that say you shouldn't do that. But my view is it's a little more difficult maybe for some of them. And now eventually they're going to have to figure out. But if you look at the growth of the revenue that's come in, if you didn't have homestead and just how the revenue from the non-homestead has grown, honestly, you'd be pretty close to where we are now, not too distant future, the way it is. Because, people come and, they'll buy a second home, they'll do this. And this tends to be at the higher end. So they're assessed higher and they're paying more tax. But we have an opportunity to give people relief on this. So we're going to be working. I know there's been a lot of great work that is being discussed. I've been talking with some of the senators, but I know some House members are working on a lot of stuff. We got to be bold. We got to be strong, and we got to do something that's going to have a meaningful difference in people's lives and the lives of families. Otherwise, it just ain't gonna fly. So thanks everybody that's been a part of this. We've done a lot of great stuff. This shows, there's a lot of places where, the budget's like the worst thing to deal with because the outlook is so gloomy. The facts are so bad. They got some of these states are running massive shortfalls, this, that. You have a state now that has a maxed out rainy day fund, has major reserves. I think every year I've been governor has been record reserves. Like we had more at the height of COVID because I did Moving Florida Forward, tax cuts, all this other stuff. But pretty much every year I've been governor, I don't think there's any other year where there have been more reserves that we've had in our budget. And yet I think if you go back to my first year and you do inflation and population adjusted, so the top line's higher, but I don't think you're going to see it that has been that much different over this period. I think it's been pretty stable. I think it's reflected population growth, and obviously you've had to adapt to a more inflationary environment. I have some projects I had to fund twice because of how much they went up because the inflation, pay 80 million one year, then you got to kick in another 40 or something, the next year. And it's like, I hate doing that. I have heartburn doing that. I want to veto that when I see that on my desk. Trust me, it just bugs me. But the reality is that's a function of what was going on with the economy. So we're in great shape. We got to keep the momentum going. And I want to thank everybody that's been involved. So we're going to hear from some of the stakeholders. So we'll start with education and Stassi.
Well, good afternoon, Orlando. It's great to be here, to be able to set the record straight today. I know there's been all kinds of false attacks that have been taking place, and so I'm excited because facts are stubborn things. And today, Governor DeSantis' proposed budget once again affirms Florida's commitment to teachers, to students, and student safety as a top priority to maintain our #1 status as the education state in the nation. When I became the Commissioner of Education, I set the goal of having 2 main priorities: student safety and student success. And I'm proud that this year's budget clearly reflects those commitments. Unions, leftist school board members, and certain media outlets continue to suggest that Florida is somehow defunding public education. The reality is that is the exact opposite, and we're going to prove it to you here today. But why? Why do they assert that? Well, with the unions, the legislation that's been championed by this governor over the years has them at a point where they're at their weakest in this state's history. They are trying to preserve themselves and assert their relevance. How do we know that? Look at Lee County schools. They were sued over fighting for greater pay incentives for their teachers to go teach in low-performing schools. They wanted to get the best performing teachers to teach the students who are struggling most, and the teachers union sued them. Look at school board members who are fighting us and who are putting things out there, putting out racist comments on social media. We're calling it out. Why are they doing this? Because they want name ID. They are thinking of the next thing that they want to run for, and unfortunately, they are not prioritizing our students. And what about the media? Well, the media wants to sell papers. And the reality is, we announced our progress monitoring results just recently. Our students are doing better this year than where they were in both English and mathematics. Not a single media outlet reported on it. It's unfortunate. But the reality is, this administration is going to do what we've always done. We're going to prioritize students, we're going to prioritize teacher pay, and we're going to make sure we have a world-class education system. The proposed budget raises the per-student funding to $9,406 per student. That's an increase of nearly $300 per student. This increase will provide the most per-student funding in Florida's history, reinforcing our commitment to support student achievement. The governor is also recommending nearly $1.6 billion in funding to provide salary increases for teachers and other instructional personnel, an appropriation that did not exist before this governor took office. Over the past 7 years, he has consistently funded this appropriation to the point of nearly $6 billion over the tenure of his administration. We know that high-quality teachers have a tremendous impact on students, which is why this continued investment in raising teacher pay is essential to ensuring every student has an exceptional teacher leading their instruction. The proposed budget will continue to also support school choice options for families, including funding for students to participate in the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program. This funding will further allow parents in every zip code to select the school that best fits their child's need, whether that's a public school, whether that's a private school, or a home education program. Just 2 years ago, roughly 250,000 students participated in Florida's scholarship program. Now we are at more than 500,000 students that are benefiting from these choice programs. Recently, a state auditor general report examined various funding accountability challenges associated with the scholarship program. And even before those audit findings were released, the department was already addressing ways to ensure that the program ran more smoothly and efficiently for this school year. The Auditor General recommended moving the Family Empowerment Scholarship into a separate silo of the public school funding formula. This is a smart and balanced solution, one that respects the growth of the scholarship program while ensuring that public schools are funded accurately and fairly. And I'm glad that this governor's budget aligns with that recommendation. The budget also includes $20 million for the Schools of Hope program, which is an increase of $14 million to provide critical funding for proven high-performing charter school operators to establish, open, and operate within the neighborhoods of Florida's chronically struggling public schools. Schools of Hope provide an additional option for families to access a world-class education for their child. In addition to school choice, Governor DeSantis has championed civics education through his tenure. With this proposed budget, he is continuing that commitment with enhanced investments to civics education and civics and debate initiatives. The proposed budget includes $3 million to support and expand the Florida Civics and Debate Initiative, which provides students critical thinking skills, speech and debate skills, civil discourse skills. And over the past 5 years, this program has grown from just 50 teams that were participating in our state to over 400 teams in every single county. Additionally, an allocation of $3 million, which is an increase of $2 million, will be dedicated to provide support to school districts for the improvement of civic literacy for Florida students using regional civics literacy captains and coaches. Also included in the budget is $1.5 million, and that's an increase of $1 million, to support teachers by providing civics professional learning opportunities. And I can't forget to mention there is $10 million in this budget, which is an increase of $6.5 million for the Civics Seal of Excellence program that will allow nearly 2,700 teachers to benefit from a $3,000 stipend for completing the course. Upskilling our educators will ensure that students will grow civic virtues that are essential to maintaining our constitutional republic. In addition to prioritizing K-12 education, Governor DeSantis has also emphasized post-secondary education and workforce education. The budget proposal allocates nearly $2 billion in state funding for the Florida college system, ensuring that all of our great 28 institutions receive the resources they need to strengthen their programs and better prepare students for high in-demand careers. And I want to thank the college presidents. I want to thank the Board of Trustees. I want to thank you, Governor, because we know that the impact that these colleges are having on their communities, for the local economy, as well as for these students to be able to go down workforce pathways and to be able to get great paying jobs, it's second to none. And so I thank them for doing it in an efficient manner, in a cost-effective manner. And so this is a great investment in our public college system. The budget also invests $800 million in workforce education programs, including $20 million specifically designated to create or expand pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships, giving students more pathways to gain valuable hands-on experience and enter the workforce career ready. Since 2019, this governor has invested more than $12 billion in workforce education. With these additional investments, Florida will remain the top state for workforce education. The proposed budget also focuses on school safety with increased funding for school hardening and the Guardian program. $106 million total for school hardening. That includes $42 million for K-12 campuses and a new investment of $64 million for higher education. This new funding for higher education will provide $44 million for state colleges to implement hardening measures and $20 million for universities to install door locks on classrooms. Also included with school safety funding is $12.5 million for the Guardian program, which will maintain the $6.5 million for our school districts and a new investment of $6 million for higher education. That $6 million will provide $4.2 million for our state colleges and $1.8 million for universities to establish these Guardian programs on their campuses. This funding for school safety will ensure that students continue to have the resources needed to maintain safe and secure campuses statewide. It is clear that Governor DeSantis remains deeply committed to supporting education by making direct, strategic investments where they matter most, in our students, in our teachers, and in their safety. Despite the claims of unions, activist school board members, and the media, under Governor DeSantis' leadership, Florida is investing in education at record levels across multiple areas. Each of these investments play an important role in reinforcing and advancing Florida's public education system and will ensure that Florida continues to lead the nation in education excellence, opportunity, and school safety. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for being here today to discuss and talk about some of the most important issues in state government, and that's the upcoming budget cycle. But before I do that, I had the opportunity to listen to the governor and the commissioner speak about public education, and it allowed me to reflect a little bit on my experience as a Florida native, having gone to start with high school, public high school. I went to State College for the police academy after I went to high school. Then I went to a four-year public university and then to a public law school. And I've always felt so blessed and so thankful to be a Floridian. And that's going back, 10, 15, 20 years now when I finished my professional education. And I've always felt very grateful. I've always valued and appreciated my experiences at each and every one of those institutions. I want to thank the commissioner for coming to Orlando, home of UCF, and wearing orange and blue. I appreciate your boldness, Commissioner. But I, at a very deep level, I always felt so much value out of going to public university and public schools. And I look at what this governor has done since he started, and I look at the advancements and the focus in the public education system, and I look at what the universities are doing in the state, UCF included, University of Florida, Florida State. I am so proud of our public education system, and particularly its emphasis not just on four-year universities, but the improvement that are obvious at the K through 12 levels, but also in the Florida college system as well, and an emphasis and focus not just on getting a degree, but on technical jobs and technical careers as well in the trades. That is the lifeblood of our workforce, and so we have a lot to be proud of. I know this budget is well supporting our teachers and our public university systems. And the two professional joys in my life have been A, working for Governor Ron DeSantis, and then B, working with the Florida Highway Patrol and nearly 2,000 very brave state troopers. And so for me to be able to be with the governor to talk about investments in the Florida Highway Patrol is also a very unique joy for me. The Florida Highway Patrol and the department as a whole has been very productive over the last several years. It goes beyond just traffic safety. We have been engaged in the fight for public safety statewide, whether it is protests at universities, making sure that Jewish students can go to Sabbath and to temple through Operation Faithful Service when they were under attack, both in Israel and here. Going to the southern border, immigration enforcement, getting the worst of the worst off our streets and into the criminal justice system. Day in and day out, Florida state troopers have stepped up and met that mission, and the governor's proposed budget not just supports them, but it honors them. Two of the main issues that I wanted to speak about today that are critical to the public safety aspect of the department is the career development plan. The governor has supported this concept for as long as I've been executive director. We're thankful for that. I'm confident this will be the year that the Florida State Highway Patrol and other state troopers will receive, with this recommended budget, a career development plan. You can go to any agency. You can walk outside, and if you see an Orlando police officer or an Orange County deputy sheriff, you ask them, do you have a career development plan? They'll tell you yes. But at the Florida Highway Patrol, we do not. This is a pathway for sustainability, for retention. It provides a financial pathway and picture for state troopers to continue to serve the state of Florida and to continue to serve you as Florida motorists and Florida residents. Can't tell you how many state troopers I've interacted with in my 3 years who have said, Director, I love being a state trooper. I love our leadership. I love our governor, but I cannot, in good faith, stay at this agency unless there's a career development plan. And they have to transfer to Orlando Police or Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And in many respects, as a family man, it's an honest and fair decision to make. And so, Governor, thank you for supporting this concept. Thank you for supporting our state troopers. We've won also in the last 3 years, we've won every year the best looking cruiser contest nationwide, the black and tan, thank you. Some of it is that I think personally that our vehicle is the paint scheme, it's iconic. The other side of it is that troopers take a lot of pride in their equipment. And so whether you're getting pulled over by a state trooper or you're driving by one down the highway, the car is probably going to look clean and well taken care of. But the truth is, if you were to sit in that car, which is their office, over, I think, 90% of our fleet has over 90,000 miles on it, and that's above the recommended mileage. And so this, for pursuit vehicles, so this budget has a deep investment and renewing and refreshing our fleet. If you look at what we've paid for the Dodge Charger 2 or 3 years ago, the cost of the acquisition of that pursuit vehicle has gone up over 50%. And so these vehicles are important to not just your public safety, but to the safety of the trooper driving them. And so, Governor, thank you for supporting our number 2 priority, which is a reinvestment in our fleet. On the motor services side, and as we know, the state is growing. Net immigration is at record levels in the state of Florida. There's a reason why. We have a governor that takes care of the state of Florida and the people. We have an education system that is top notch. And I think that one of the most important issues is also our residents feel safe and are safe here in the state of Florida. And there's an emphasis on public safety. But this budget also invests millions of needed dollars into our infrastructure and IT infrastructure for motor services, our credentialing, our licensing, our registrations. All of those are very important for convenience, first of all, but also for public safety. It's important that we have the correct cybersecurity systems and that we're properly credentialing folks that are moving to our state and getting the license. And so I'm excited about this budget proposal. I'm very thankful for the governor's leadership of the state of Florida and his emphasis on public safety. And it's an honor, sir, to work for you, and it's an honor to work on your behalf. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Governor, and thank you for the privilege of joining such an elite team of agency commissioners and directors, as well as the opportunity to rapidly deliver a state guard that you envision for Florida that's appropriate to the public safety challenges, not just for today, but also for tomorrow. Governor, your proposed budget returns the Florida State Guard to a resourcing level that is necessary to fulfill the roles and responsibilities we have in emergency management and public safety that are charged in state law, things we're supposed to do, such as supporting our essential requirements in emergency response and public safety, but also to train to the same high levels and standards as we do our great Florida National Guard, and to do so in conjunction with state and local agencies. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor's budget proposal will allow the Florida State Guard to resume full recruiting, training, operations, and maintenance programs across our emergency management and our public safety portfolio. The governor's budget restores the Florida State Guard's mission readiness, and it returns the State Guard to a growth trajectory needed to sustain our capacity to support our communities in need year-round. In the last 3 years since our governor reconstituted the Florida State Guard, we have been activated 18 times. That's an average of our state calling upon us every other month for the past 3 years. And these phenomenal volunteer soldiers providing critical support to numerous emergency support functional areas. As an example, in a single 90-day period alone, the Florida State Guard activated 94% of our soldiers to provide critical community resilience support across 18 counties, and that included going to help Floridians in other states where their governors failed them. These Category 3, Category 4 hurricanes, these are tornadoes, these are out-of-season river flooding, these are winter storms, and more. The federal requirements that are also levied on our understrained Florida National Guard continue to increase, and that reduces their available forces for statewide emergency response while they focus on their primary warfighting mission areas. As Director Kernan mentioned, the increasing public safety requirements, especially in the air and maritime domains, countering illegal immigration, countering trafficking, are areas where the Florida State Guard is already augmenting local and state law enforcement agencies so their sworn officers can perform their primary missions. These are just daily examples of where the Florida State Guard serves as a critical cornerstone of the state's emergency response and the public safety system. Our ground, air, marine, and special missions units have all been credited with life-saving actions. These are high-risk mission sets, and they require high-quality, competent, effective, safe, and physically sustainable training programs. The Florida State Guard costs substantially less to the taxpayer than any other agency or the National Guard that operates in this space. We cost less per man hour, less per Marine engine hour, less per flight hour. The governor's budget proposal improves significantly over the current year's reduced authorizations. For example, with the governor's budget, we can guarantee year-round responsiveness, we can guarantee scale, we can guarantee endurance anywhere you need us. We can reduce the substantial risk exposure to our soldiers that are operating in these dangerous mission areas by ensuring they stay trained, they stay qualified and credentialed to required state and federal standards. We can properly maintain our high-value air, maritime, and our amphibious rescue assets. We can resume entry-level training to bring in new volunteers rather than turning away hundreds of Floridians that call us every month wanting to join, refreshing our ranks with new experience. And most importantly, the governor's budget will allow us to return full-time to our communities, partnering, training, and operating along our emergency management and our public safety agencies on a weekly and a monthly basis. Sir, thank you for your relentless leadership, your drive, your boldness. Your budget again provides for a fiscally responsible and sustainable state guard. Your budget preserves taxpayer investments and ensures the right resources are matched against the right requirements. Thank you very much.
Okay. And one thing I didn't mention that, I mean, people will see in terms of, there's a lot of continuity in what we're doing. Obviously, Stassi talked about the education, but that we've been doing that, right? We're building on it, teacher pay, total budget, all that stuff, civics, universities, environment. We've been doing that. We started very boldly on Everglades. We've been doing all that. Transportation, again, building off of it. One thing that we're doing that is more than we've done is corrections, to be able to pay correction officers more to retain them, and then to be able to hire new, because, I think most people figured out, I don't like releasing people from prison, right? I mean, you serve your sentence, that's one thing. We don't release early. And so we want to make sure people are held accountable. But the reality with that is, even though crime's at a 50-year low, partially because, people are held accountable and they're doing. So you need to be able to do that. So you'll see more FTEs for corrections. I think the budget leaves us, for my tenure, a net reduction of state employees of about 1,000. But there will be an increase for corrections, and there'll also be money. I think we're probably at about 450 or 470 million for these corrections enhancements. And, got to the point where, I had National Guard and stuff to help, because they're making so little money, you could make more at Wawa. And so I'm just thinking, would you rather be in watching some very violent people, or would you rather be making toasted subs and make more money? I mean, seriously, it's not the best vocation. I mean, there's risks involved. It's tough work. And if you can make more money, just, it's some other stuff, people are going to do that. So we've done big increase. We've gotten it better, but we do need to get more just to be competitive, just to make sure we can retain people. But ultimately, that's part of the consequence from having policies where you want to be strong on crime. Every time there's ever been any talk of releasing early, I don't do it. I don't think it's worked anywhere. And we have truth in sentencing in Florida. You go, you do the crime, you do the time, and I think that's what we got to keep that, because if we turned our back on that, you would see the crime rate go up. So the correction budget reflects, I think, that philosophy. Okay, do we got any questions back there? Do you want to talk about that? Because I know Stassi and I have been talking about it, but he's very well read on it.
Yeah, so that's what I mentioned in my, when I was up here presenting. This budget does reflect one of those recommendations, but we were intentional in going into the school year to get ahead of it. And so in the cross-checking process, we're actually working with the districts to verify that the students that are saying they're receiving the scholarship are in fact receiving the scholarship. If there's any dispute, we pause the money, we make sure we get to the bottom of it, and then we ensure that the process moves forward properly so that the money goes to where it needs to go. Well, I think we would address the legislation as it comes, and we'll look at it. But I'm saying, with respect to the response of the audit report itself, those are some of the actions that the department's done already to get ahead of the issues.
I mean, the one thing, and there may be legislation, maybe the department, the way this stuff funds, it's like the bodies, right? And you have people moving around a lot. We've discussed, is there going to be just a window? Okay, you make the decision, and then it's not kind of keep going back, because that has impacted some of because it's just the way it's calculated, right? And we want to have certainty. So there may be ways to be able to do that, and I know they're working on some of the stuff. So I wouldn't say that we're opposed to the idea of legislation. We're just going to have to look at it and see how it comes. So the immigration detention. So remember, we were leading the country in assisting DHS with the mission. DHS didn't have the resources to get the job done. We stepped up. Some other states have followed. But the one thing they asked us was to help with they needed a place to process, detain before they could do removal, because there's a bureaucracy involved, right? I mean, it is what it is. So, but they said this is reimbursable. So I still hear people saying, oh, Floridians, this one. Like, they're reimbursing everything we're doing, right? So what we're doing is saving Floridians tax money for sure, because all the operations are reimbursed, so we're even Steven on that. But illegal immigration costs taxpayers. It costs taxpayers with medical. It costs taxpayers with education. It costs taxpayers when we have car accidents. I mean, you get hit by an illegal alien, do you think you're going to get an insurance payment from them if they're at fault? No, of course not. So there's all those different things. So that definitely saves. So I just think it's important to just stress, because the media said, they're spending all this money. And they would, when they would submit for like bids, they would say, what's the possible? And they were trying to say they spent $600 million on alligator rock. That's not the way it works. So that's missed. But they make it sound like, there's you don't know you're going to. Now we know DHS has confirmed that. We actually have gotten reimbursed for stuff already. So that's just that. So what we're doing for our budget purpose is not hitting this at all. DHS is reimbursed. We're saving because obviously there's a drag on taxpayer resources when you have people here illegally. So we have opened one up in Northeast Florida called the Deportation Depot in Baker County. We are in the process of doing one in the Panhandle. And then we're also in the process of doing another one in the southern half of the state. Now, I said this from the beginning. This is not permanent. DHS should handle all of this, right? And in a perfect world, they would have the facilities. They've got Chrome down in Miami. They don't, honestly, in Florida, they have very little. And so we've had to supplement. But the minute that they have what they need, then we obviously we're not just doing this for our health. We're doing it because there's a need to do it. So I'd anticipate that, you may see the Panhandle and and another one in the southern half of the state. But that also will then affect some of these others, because, how much are they doing? How much do you have to have? What personnel? I mean, if you have a steady flow of the census is 500, that's a lot different than if the census is 2,000, right? So we work through all that, but it's all reimbursed, and we want to be able to do. And even like alligator Alcatraz, we'll get reimbursed. We're reimbursed. So it's not like it's a net, but like some of the cost of that is, wastewater removal. And so that there's no runoff from the airport to anywhere in the local environment. And people said, oh, you're going to hurt the environment. No, we're containing that all. But then they say, well, you're spending money. Well, you can't have. So at the end of the day, I think a lot of those folks, they just don't want to see immigration enforcement, period. I mean, obviously, you see some of these anti-ICE protesters in Portland and whatnot. And another thing I point out, because the media has been talking about, you have, in Alligator Outro, some of this, you have a lot of criminal aliens. If you look at their rap sheets, you got people that are sexual predators. You got people that have committed, really serious offenses. They shouldn't have been in this country to begin with. And now they're making claims, oh, they're being abused. None of that is substantial. When the media says that, understand, they're just taking the word of that. They said, oh, in Chrome. Now, we're not involved with Chrome. That's DHS. But they're like, oh, Chrome, they're putting you in this black box or whatever. And they drew an artist rendering of it. Well, how come nobody has taken how come nobody's seen it? We asked DHS, are you doing it? No, we're not doing it. It's fabricated. And it's interesting because when we set up the first one, again, the feds asked us to help. So they set it up down at the airport in the Everglades. And I'm walking through this in like a thing, and I'm like, And they've got this and that and mess hall and this and that. And I'm like, do you really need to have all this stuff? Because honestly, I thought it was over the top, everything that they had there, library and this. And they're like, well, you know, we don't want to be in a situation where we're being accused of mistreating them. I was like, they are going to accuse you of that no matter what. You put them up in the Ritz-Carlton, they are going to accuse you of doing that. That's the narrative. That's what these people do. But none of that has been substantiated, and it's all based off just, you know, accusations of people that are, quite frankly, have violated laws in this country in a really, really big way. You know, I'll leave that to Blaise Ngolia, our CFO. He's been a very big advocate for taxpayers. I mean, honestly, probably the best that we've seen of anyone in state government that I can think of. Very much a bulldog on this. But, you know, he actually made some comments. He did Orlando City, and he actually said they did a better job than the county. And he gave them credit on some of the things that they were doing. And he's going after red counties, too. Big time red counties that he's going after. And so I think this is, but it all goes back to the tidbit I mentioned in the opening remarks. If we were here in 2019, local governments were taking in $32 billion in property tax statewide. Today, they're taking in $56 billion. And I would just ask, I know we've had population, I know we've had inflation, but accounting for that, that's still a massive increase, right? And I just think like, you know, are your services, is everything so much better as a result of that? And I think most people would say there's not really been a change, right? And so, you know, you've had properties get valued higher. And first of all, we don't know how long that's going to last. The market goes up and down. You know, you have people that bought a home 10 years ago for $300,000, and now they're being told it's worth $1 million. Maybe. But they never sold it for $1 million. Nobody ever paid them $1 million. You're just telling them it's worth $1 million. What? Because one down the street went? So you have this situation where there's been a gusher of property tax revenue, and, you know, they've been spending it. You know, that's what they've been doing. They've been spending it. So we look at and say, okay, what can we do, you know, to make a difference? We've done all the tax relief. We've done different things with infrastructure. We've done things with education. I mean, obviously, you know, in Florida, your kid, you don't have to pay for baby items tax on that. You can do a Florida prepaid, and then they go for that, and that's a really good deal. But even if you don't, you pay, you know, very little compared to every other state in the country for college, this, that. So we try to do. But property tax, it's biting people. You know, the car insurance, we did the reform on it. And the homeowners insurance, we did that a few years ago. It was very difficult to do because there's a lot of stakeholders there, and you know, people make a lot of money off this system, you know, kind of the way it was. So we had to do reforms there. And now, auto insurance, everyone's filing rate reductions. State Farm is filing rate, all these stuff. And so some people are like, well, I didn't get a reduction. I'm like, did you shop around? They're like, no. I'm like, well, you got to shop around. If somebody knows you're going to pay a certain amount, they're going to keep taking it. You got to show them that you're willing to go somewhere else. So that's all. But Progressive is now in the process of refunding $1 billion to policyholders solely because of the reforms that we did. And I think you're looking at every major auto carrier is going to have probably an average of 10% as they come. Homeowners, you know, you had Peninsula. I think they did an 8% reduction. That's our biggest home insurer. You've had 17 companies now enter the market. And so like people say, how does it go? They're not just, if it's one company, they're not just going to lower it because they're nice. That's not the way business works. They lower it because they have to. They lower it because there's competition and you can go somewhere else. That is how you put a downward pressure on it. It is not through the kindness of their heart. And it is not through government setting prices. If it was as easy to set the price, hell, I'd sign a bill to say you pay $1 a month, right? If that's what it would do, but we know that's not how it works. So you're going to see more of that. And we didn't have a storm this year, and so that was a big deal. So, you know, now people are looking and saying like, man, you know, Florida, and then even some of the hurricanes we've had, Hurricane Milton, it came through. I think I'm doing like CNBC the next morning, and like Governor DeSantis, some estimated now you're at $51 billion. And I'm like, how the hell would you know? Like literally the morning after the storm, you can assess 51 billion? No, you can't. But they were saying that, and it ended up being about 5 billion in terms of this. And so I think we're resilient to these storms because the stuff that's been built in the last 20 years holds up a lot better. Now, some of the areas that they built more low-lying, that's an issue with flood, but in terms of the wind and all that. So I think people have more confidence in the market. But that's been a huge pinch. So there's relief now with the auto. We're seeing, and citizens insurance. That got to be like 1.3 million people. The problem with that is if there was a big storm, they don't have the money to be able to do. Now you've had a lot go in the private sector because these new companies are coming in. So now it's down to, I think it's probably about 400,000 and may even be below that. Well, guess what? Well, now that's solvent. So they're going to be able to do a reduction, certainly for Florida, primary homeowners. So those are good trends, but it's not something that we fully control. What we fully control, we meaning the people through our Constitution, is the tax. You can choose to tax something, you can choose not to. You can choose to lower it. Obviously, we wouldn't choose to increase, and it wouldn't pass if you put it on the ballot. So that's what we're doing. So it's really all about helping people be able to realize the American dream. And that may be, raising the family. It may be, you're on a fixed income and you need to stay in your home and the taxes are tough. And, we don't want someone to have to sell their home because they can't afford the tax. So all those things I think are very important to us. But it all goes back into, I think what Blaze's efforts is showing is, there's been a lot of increases in spending that hasn't necessarily moved the needle in terms of your quality of life, right? And it'd be one thing if there were things that were just, but 6 years ago it was 32 billion. Now it's 56 billion. It's almost doubling in 6 years. And forget about even obviously we want it to be benefit taxpayers, but put the taxpayer aside. Is it sustainable to almost double budgets every 6 or 7 years? No, I mean, like you obviously can't do that. And part of it was a unique set of circumstances because we had such a rush to Florida and the property values really went up. But man, that's pretty dramatic to go from 32 to 56 billion. So here's the issue with Schools of Hope, because a lot of the stuff you hear, I mean, honestly, it does. If you know the underlying issue, doesn't make sense. So Schools of Hope, this is not we're going to go into Windermere and do a school, or we're going to go into Palm Beach and do a school. They are going to the toughest areas that we have, where a lot of people have given up on some of these students, and they are going in there and they are going to create an environment where these kids can learn. And they did it in New York City. What's the aptitude of Success Academy? 93% reading, 96% math. What's the average is like 60%, 50 some? 57, 58. So they've gone into the worst areas in terms of opportunity. They're going to the most at risk, and they're 90+%. So that's what they're doing. They're going areas where no one else wants to go. And so one of the things that the legislature put in this bill, which I think is good, is, okay, if you have a school that's not using facilities, if they need the facilities, they get it, 100%. But if they're not using it, the School of Hope can go in, use existing facilities, which saves taxpayers money, by the way, because this is there, that's there. And then they're able to go and do schooling, using those resources. So the actual school, wasn't using that. Now, look, if you have excess property, you want to sell it or something, they're entitled to do that. Of course they can do that. It's their property. But if you have vacant buildings and they're just sitting idle, Schools of Hope has an ability to go in and do it. And it isn't going to be, I'm hearing like places in like, some of these more affluent areas like complaining, you ain't going to have Schools of Hope there. It isn't going to affect you. We're going to go in areas where kids need a lifeline. And this is not going to be, it's not going to be 100 schools. I think what kind of set off some of this is you had one operator submit like 60 applications or 100 applications. It was ridiculous. And the department said, why are you doing this? You're not going to get that. And that told people like, oh, well, yeah, even in Sarasota and even in here, they're going to come in and take some of the school, that my Sally or my Johnny goes to. No, that's not what's going to happen. So you're talking about some hard areas in Miami, probably Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, probably Orlando, maybe Tampa, maybe Jacksonville. And that's what it'd be. So the mission is very clear. It's a difficult mission, but at least with Success Academy, you have an operator who's been able to do some really, really great things. And so my view as the governor is, every single kid in this state has some God-given ability. And it's the job of the parents, but also the education. Get that ability out to come to the forefront. And it's easier in sometimes than others. Sometimes, honestly, the school has to do very little because the parents are really driving it. But there's others where those kids may not be as lucky. So they're using it's vacant buildings, right? So if they want to sell a building, they can sell a building. I mean, it's not going to be a fiscal drain on them. But the question would be, would it be better to say, okay, charter schools of hope, go build a new building or to do a different lease somewhere else? That would cost more money, to be able to do it. So this is all going to work out very sensibly. The commissioner will work with any district. I mean, the goal, honestly, you're really relieving burdens on the district, right? Because, you're creating a program where it is going to be targeted at going to service the least advantaged students. And in areas where a lot of people say it's not even worth trying, right? Oh, don't even worry about this vote. No, they believe you go anywhere, you can do it if you have the right formula in place. But this is not going to be something where a school of hope is going to be coming in and descending on Palm Harbor or Destin or some of these places. And I hear some of this stuff, and I'm just like, that is just not accurate. It's the same thing when you hear people saying that somehow they're defunding schools or not doing. Well, like all you have to do is look at every budget I've put out. We've increased funding every single year. Teachers every single year. We went from there was zero money when I became governor that was earmarked just for teachers. Now we're proposing $1.58 billion just for teachers. And that's on top of a lot of other. And, the thing is on the teachers, like Stassi mentioned the Civic Seal of Excellence. When they go through that, they get a bonus. They get $3,000 bonus just for attending this course over the weekend. There's other things that they're able to do. I mean, we've had the school recognition bonuses. That money's gone out in the past. So there's a whole host of things. But Schools of Hope, I think, is going to make a big impact. I think geographically it's going to be very limited. I don't think most Floridians are even going to know that there's a School of Hope. Because, quite frankly, probably where they're setting up, a lot of Floridians aren't spending a lot of time in some of these areas. But they're going to go in. They're very mission-driven. And I think you're going to see some positive results out of this, and it's all going to work out, very well. This is supposed to be an addition and value add, but it's being very efficiently done. Having idle buildings doesn't make sense for anybody. If the idle buildings are there, let Success Academy. I mean, Success is the one that's really has the proven record. I know these other people are going to apply. I'm not dinging any of these other charter operators, but I know the one that's been able to do it against very difficult odds has been Success Academy. Well, like I said on the closing comments about this, a sign of success is that we're able to be here proposing, the 8th budget from a position of strength. We have a maxed out rainy day fund. We're not scrambling to try to plug budget holes. We're able to propose the biggest pay increase for teacher in the history of Florida without breaking a sweat. We're able to do environmental restoration way beyond my first week in office when I went out there and made a splash, and all the people that loved all this stuff were so happy. but they were cautiously optimistic because they knew it was a tough. We've blown that out of the water. If you look at what we've done with transportation, accelerating projects 10, 15, 20 years, this is good. So that ultimately is a sign of success. We had a $1.3 billion rainy day fund. Now it's $5 billion. We had, I think, about $7.5 billion in reserves. Now we're close to $17 billion. And we'll probably have even, it's interesting. You hear a lot about the economy, and there's obviously, nationwide, you see some of these blurbs for sure, and I think it's real. But in Florida, I'm talking to our revenue director, and he's like, yeah, November because they estimate how much revenue the state's going to take in. Yeah, we were $250 million over estimate. I mean, and this is when people they're predicting some of the economists are trying to say, Florida's going to be struggling in the future. Like you hear people say this stuff, and yet what's happening? $250 million more than was anticipated. So the numbers that I have here really reflects through November 30th. So December, January, February, March, April, May, and June, any overage there, that would add to the reserves. So you very well could be, $17, $18 billion in reserves, which is really significant. So the fact that we're here being able to do all those things, that's a sign of success. It's a sign that we've been good fiscal stewards. And I mentioned, we've had good allies in the legislature who, they could have tried to be more like New York or California, and they've really wanted to do Floridians first. And as I said, I vetoed billions of dollars. I vetoed more than any governor. And you got to do what you got to do, right? But at the same time, I think by and large, it's been productive. So that's a great thing. And we'll see what happens politically down the road. I mean, I don't sweat over all these things because they kind of work themselves out. And if there's a role for me, and I feel strongly, then I'm happy to do certain things. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of Floridians are focusing on races for next year yet. I think that there's a lot of issues that we want to do. So, the best thing we can do is to just continue to be really strong on all the things that matter for the people of this state. All right, guys. God bless everybody. Thank you.